Imagine a family of 10 smiling through your TV screen, soundtracked by an upbeat, generic 2000s acoustic guitar. You thought you were watching the ultimate chaotic, wholesome American dream, right? Fast forward to today, and a single book cover shatters that nostalgia into a million pieces. It's a photo of a mother forcefully covering her young son's mouth. Collin Gosselin is finally speaking, and the secrets he's spilling make the reality TV cameras look like a front for a literal nightmare. But just how dark did things get when the cameras stopped rolling? The locked room in the basement. People have to look at what happened the second the TLC production crew packed up their gear and drove away to understand how a chubby-cheeked kid from Pennsylvania ended up writing a harrowing tell-all memoir. For years, viewers watched Kate Gosselin march around her pristine house, managing her hyper-organized color-coded schedules, barking orders at her husband, and keeping 8 toddlers perfectly in line. It was stressful, sure, but it was packaged as the relatable chaos of modern parenting. But according to Collin, behind the closed doors of that massive Wernersville estate, the discipline wasn't just strict, it was allegedly psychological warfare, and he was the primary target. Collin's first major revelation completely tears down the myth of the quirky, type A reality mom. He alleges that he was systematically isolated from his brothers and sisters, effectively turned into the family's scapegoat. While the other kids played, Collin claims he was frequently banished to the basement. But it wasn't just a standard timeout. The upcoming memoir details horrifying instances where he alleges his hands and feet were bound with zip ties, leaving him trapped alone in a dark, concrete room for hours on end. Try to sit with that image for a second. While America was falling in love with these kids on television, buying their merchandise, and tuning in by the millions, one of those very children was allegedly being treated like a prisoner in his own home. Why him? That is the question that has haunted fans since these allegations leaked. In a toxic family dynamic, the scapegoat is often the child who naturally questions authority, reacts to the stress around them, or simply refuses to play along with the scripted perfection. Collin admits he was a spirited kid, but in Kate's hyper-controlled world, any deviation from the script was treated as a threat to the family brand. Collin alleges that his mother took out her deep-seated anger, marital frustrations, and the immense pressure of fame directly on him. He wasn't just disciplined, he was seemingly erased from the family unit while still living under the same roof, forced to eat meals separately and banned from standard sibling interactions. The psychological toll of this kind of targeted isolation on a developing child is almost unimaginable. Imagine being 10 years old, watching your brothers and sisters laugh and play upstairs through a basement floorboard, knowing a camera crew is celebrating your family's bliss to the world, while you are locked in the dark. Collin's account suggests that Kate didn't just want to punish him, she wanted to break his spirit so he wouldn't disrupt the highly lucrative reality TV empire she had built. It was a flawless facade on the screen, but underneath the floorboards, a dark dependency on control was spiraling out of hand. So, how do you make a child like that completely disappear without raising suspicion from the network or the fans? The 2016 disappearance, the truth behind the special needs institution in 2016, eagle-eyed fans of the show noticed something jarring. The Gosselin family portraits felt empty. On social media and in magazine spreads, one face was suddenly missing from the lineup of 8. Collin was gone. When pressed by a confused and increasingly suspicious public, Kate Gosselin offered a calm, clinical explanation. Collin had special needs and required intensive, full-time behavioral therapy. She painted herself as a heartbroken but brave mother making the ultimate sacrifice for the welfare of her child and the safety of her home. But according to Collin, the truth of his sudden disappearance wasn't a medical necessity, it was a calculated, state-sanctioned exile designed to silence him permanently. At just 12 years old, Collin was packed up and dropped off at a behavioral health institution. For a child who had already spent years being isolated in his own basement, this was the ultimate abandonment. He wasn't sent to a cozy, supportive therapeutic boarding school, he was placed into a rigid, locked facility. Collin alleges that the reality inside those walls was a living hell. He claims he was heavily medicated against his will, stripped of his autonomy, and subjected to physical restraints. In his interviews, he described a terrifying environment where staff members would routinely hold him down on the floor if he showed any signs of distress or frustration. The narrative Kate had fed to the media was that Collin was inherently dangerous and unpredictable. But looking back through the lens of his upcoming memoir, it looks far more like a mother using an institutional loophole to remove a whistleblower from her house. He wasn't sick, he was just a kid who knew too much and refused to stay quiet. For nearly 3 long years, Collin was trapped inside the system, almost completely cut off from the outside world. Kate rarely visited, and his siblings were allegedly told that Collin was where he belonged because of his issues. He was a forgotten child, buried under a mountain of medical paperwork and public relations spin. But Collin's spirit didn't completely break. In 2018, realizing that no one from his mother's camp was ever coming to get him, a 14-year-old Collin managed to smuggle a desperate, handwritten letter out of the facility. It wasn't addressed to Kate. It was addressed to his estranged father, Collin Gosselin, who had been locked out of his children's lives for years by a brutal custody agreement. The letter was a literal cry for survival. In jagged, teenage handwriting, Collin begged his father to save him, stating clearly that he was being abused, heavily medicated, and that he could not survive the facility much longer. He wrote that John was his only hope. That single letter changed everything. Armed with proof of his son's desperate situation, Collin Gosselin launched an emergency legal battle. In December 2018, a judge granted John sole legal and physical custody of Collin after Kate and her legal team failed to even show up to the court hearing. When the facility doors finally opened, Collin didn't go home to the mother who claimed to love him, he walked into the arms of the father who had to fight the legal system just to prove his son wasn't a monster. The public was told Collin was being cured. In reality, he was just being hidden away so the cameras could keep rolling without a hitch. But escaping the institution was only half the battle, because the emotional damage left behind required a whole new kind of rebellion. The ultimate insult, "Happy birthday to my real mom." When Collin finally walked free from that institution, the physical shackles were gone, but the emotional war was far from over. He was a teenager trying to piece together a normal life while carrying the psychological weight of a childhood spent under a microscope and behind locked doors. Collin Gosselin provided a safe harbor, but a teenage boy navigating that level of trauma needs more than just a roof over his head, he needs unconditional, nurturing maternal love. And since Kate had completely washed her hands of him the moment he went to live with his dad, Collin had to find that bond somewhere else. Enter Colleen Conrad, John's longtime girlfriend at the time. Colleen didn't sign up for the reality TV fame, and she certainly didn't expect to become the emotional lifeline for a deeply traumatized child. Yet, when Collin arrived at his dad's house, bruised by the system and isolated from his siblings, Colleen stepped into the vacuum left by Kate. She didn't treat him like a PR problem or a special needs liability, she treated him like a son. The depth of that relationship exploded into the public eye when Collin took to Instagram to post a birthday tribute to Colleen. It wasn't just a sweet message, it was a tactical, nuclear strike directed straight at Kate Gosselin. Collin publicly declared Colleen as his real mom, thanking her for stepping up, loving him unconditionally, and teaching him what a true mother actually looks like. The internet absolutely melted down. To the casual observer, it might have looked like a petty teenage swipe, but to fans who had watched this family for over a decade, it was a profound, heartbreaking revelation. For a child raised on television to explicitly strip his biological mother of her title on a public platform is the ultimate rejection. It proved that the maternal instinct Kate so fiercely marketed to the world on TLC was, in Collin's eyes, an absolute fraud. He wasn't just praising Colleen, he was telling the world that the woman who gave birth to him had completely forfeited the right to be called his mother. Predictably, this public declaration ignited a fresh wave of toxicity within the fractured family dynamic. While fans cheered Collin's bravery and applauded Colleen for healing a broken child, Kate's camp viewed it as an unforgivable act of betrayal, an orchestrated smear campaign engineered by John. The post drew a hard line in the sand. It signaled to the world that Collin was no longer just a victim waiting for an apology, he was an adult taking control of his own narrative, redefining family on his own terms, and leaving Kate completely behind in the rearview mirror. He was proving that blood doesn't make you a mother, actions do. But to truly understand how a mother could spark this level of public defiance from her own flesh and blood, we have to go back to where it all began. Rewinding the tape, the toxic dynamics of John and Kate plus 8. To truly understand how this family completely self-destructed, you have to rewind the tape back to 2007. It was the golden age of reality TV, a time when networks like TLC were pivoting away from educational content and leaning heavily into human interest spectacles. Enter the Gosselins, a relatable, mid-20s couple from Pennsylvania blessed or cursed with a set of toddler twins and a brand new set of sextuplets. To the average viewer collapsing onto the couch after a long workday, the show was addictive. It was the ultimate logistical circus. We watched Kate frantically navigate grocery store aisles with an army of matching strollers, organize mountains of laundry, and orchestrate military-style family vacations. It was fast-paced, it was stressful, but it was packaged as wholesome, aspirational family entertainment. But if you rewatch those classic episodes today with fresh eyes, the nostalgia instantly curdles into something deeply uncomfortable. What we collectively laughed off as type A parenting or bickering looks a lot more like a televised dictatorship in hindsight. Kate wasn't just organized, she was a hyper-controlling force of nature who ran her household with an iron fist. Her perfectionism wasn't just a quirky trait for the cameras, it was the law of the land. If John bought the wrong brand of organic juice, he was berated on camera. If the toddlers didn't sit perfectly still for a promotional photo shoot, the tension in the room became palpable. The kids weren't just growing up, they were performing under a relentless spotlight, and their mother was the director. As the ratings soared, reaching a staggering 9.8 million viewers during its peak, the financial stakes skyrocketed. The Gosselins were no longer just a large family trying to survive, they were a multi-million-dollar corporation. And in any corporation, productivity is king. The children's milestones, their potty training, their tantrums, their loose teeth, and their tears became monetizable content.